In this section, now that we've gotten the decking a little more optimized, we can get some materials on it. Right now it's Lambert 1, and I'm using Lambert 1 as kind of a gauge. What do I have materials on in the scene, what don't I? Ideally, I should end up with no gray Lambert 1 anywhere when I'm all done. For the decking, I'll right-click on a section of it and assign a new material. And I'll use a blend for a little bit of a shine here. We'll do a solid color for the decking, but a normal map in the bump to give it the appearance of a decking. First, as always, name this. So I'll call it Decking Boards. And this will be different from maybe a solid colored decking that will go on the fan section. So on the decking boards, first I'll add a color in. And I'm going to make this kind of sort of a warm French gray with a hue range somewhere above around 25, give or take 28, and a little bit of saturation, a little color. So it's not just a straight gray, but it has a little bit of a warmth to it. I'll also go down to specular shading and take the roll-off down, so it's far less shiny, and eccentricity up, so the highlight is nice and broad across the surface. And lastly, that reflection will come way down. Very, very low, so there's just a tiny bit of reflection going on in the final. Now for the bump mapping. Clicking on the texture node for bump maps, and in the Create Render Node dialog, choosing File, and into the bump value, we'll select a file. I'll click on the File folder next to Image Name, and pick Decking N. And this is a normal map I made up in Photoshop with the Ndo script, where basically it's a solid color and a gradient on the side to approximate beveled or radius deck boards with a space between. It'll give us a pretty good appearance without making all the polygons. I'll go up to the output connection, and in the bump node, use this map as tangent space normals. It's pretty typical. Finally, I need to map this. If we look at the decking here, it's fairly small. It's a square image, 256 pixels on a side. And figuring these boards are 6-inch boards, we're looking at about a 12 by 12 inch mapping size. So I'll take this object and just do some planar mapping. And on this planar mapping, we'll go 30 centimeters on a side. And then rotate it 90 degrees on the x-axis to lay it flat. Actually, I'm going to rotate this negative 90. One of the things I do when I map things, especially with a planar mapping, one of the things I'll do when I map objects with a planar mapping is once I've gotten the size set, width and height, I'll rotate the mapping tool. In this case, negative 90 lays it flat, again with the polygons facing up in the right direction. The T for transform is in the lower left. And if I go into a high quality here, I should be able to see my deck boards pretty nicely with the normal map showing. That's a nice feature, especially if you're going to go out to a game, to be able to preview things like this and get a pretty good idea of how those images are going to behave. And there's my decking along there, with far fewer polys than the original, done with a normal map. And Unity takes in normal maps quite nicely. I'll right-click and pick Object Mode, and come over to the other section of decking. I'll right-click and assign existing material and choose Decking Boards. Again, a planar mapping, Create UV's planar mapping. Rotating that mapping, negative 90, as I know from previous, to get it flat. And here's my width and height of 30 and 30. And the one thing I also want to do on that is rotate the mapping so the boards run 90 degrees from where they are, or perpendicular to the short side of the building. So in the y-axis, I can rotate these by 90, and now the boards shift, and they're in the right direction. And there's that mapping for the decking. Now the last part then on this is I need to get a like material without the normal map on the fan boards here. So right-click and choose Object Mode, and select the fan of decking, and assign a new material to it. Now, I'm going to use a blend, and this is one way to do it. The other way is I could clone the material, but I'll make a new one. And I will name this decking flat. For the color, I'll click on the color swatch, and there, right here in the color history, is the last swatch I made, that French gray. And I'll just zip to the other material very quickly and just look at the values I had put in. 0.341, 0.285, 0.65. I can even copy and paste. Back and forth. It's one quick way to do it. The nice thing about the attribute editor is that if you are in an attribute or a tab on one object and you jump to another object, you'll see the same attribute, in this case the materials. And my reflectivity was 0.065, nice and low. And now my decking is a consistent color, one with a normal and one flat, ready for import. I do want to name this. I'll take both of these objects now with their mapping, and I'll combine them. Mesh combine. And rename this Boardwalk Boards. And then I'll delete the history, just to clean it up a little bit. Under Edit, delete by type, History, or Shift-Alt-D is the hotkey. The mapping is still there, that 30 centimeter square polyplanar projection. But now the history is gone and they're just polygons with UV coordinates. And I'm ready for the next section, which is to create and apply materials for the coastline once I've got it all ready.